As Robin Day approaches his 75th birthday, a day to remember, now BBC Two looks back at his life and work.
This is Robin Day in Red Square, Moscow, the hub and heart of communist Russia. And behind me, the Kremlin.
He's a strange man, isn't he? Funny man. Hasn't he got cruel glasses? Have you noticed?
And I'm now in the middle of a road in Port Said.
For almost 40 years, Robin Day has been a household name. He was born in the year the BBC got its licence to broadcast. He's interviewed every leading politician.
On me asking some questions occasionally.
He is the father of political interviewing.
1 week from tonight until we know the result of this general election. Hello, and here we are for the first of our weekly Question Time.
Robin Day was born in London in 1923, the youngest of 3 children. His father worked for the post office, and he was educated at grammar school and then boarding school.
That, believe it or not, is me at the age of 10, obviously destined for an award-winning career on television. I remember being 10 very well because I was caned on my 10th birthday for creating a disturbance, something I've never done since.
War broke out when he was 16, and he joined the Royal Artillery 3 years later. At 24, he went up to Oxford to study law. It was in 1950 that Robin Day, then president of the Oxford Union, made his screen debut.
It was a joke, an undergraduate joke. In the summer of 1950, thought up by me, I challenged my opposite number at Cambridge, who was a young man called Norman St. John Stevas, who has since gone on to higher things, and we had a boat race in full evening dress. I was the cox of the Oxford boat, and I then weighed nearly 18 stone, so quite a sporting event.
Five years later, the newly created Independent Television News recruited Robin Day, by now a barrister.
Up to that moment, BBC News had been read without any figure on the screen, and I wanted something a little different. Now, I chose Robin because one could tell, first of all, he spoke the news as if he was interested in it, which is quite difficult, as I'm sure all of you know. And secondly, he had an astringency in his manner and his voice, which made me think he would be an extremely good interviewer. And that proved a right judgment.
I was principally concerned with surviving, because I wasn't very good to start with. In fact, that is an inaccurate statement. I was bloody awful to start with. And most of my colleagues in ITN wanted to get rid of me, because I was grim and unappealing and wasn't what they imagined a newscaster ought to be.
So when I took over ITN, I looked around and thought, well, I've got to build on what I've got. Robin Day has got many qualities. I think he was a completely unusual type, and Robin was an original. He looked the part of the prosecuting counsel.
There were hardly any interviews with prime ministers or leading ministers before 1955. There were occasional airport interviews, which were 2 or 3 minutes and so on. How did the talks go, Prime Minister?
Having cut short your lecture tour, tell us something of how you view the election prospects.
Oh, we should go into a good fight. Very good chance of winning. We should go in confidently, we always do.
And on what will Labour take its stand?
Well, that will be announcing shortly.
The great breakthrough came in his interview with Harold Macmillan early in 1958, and this was the first interview that a Prime Minister had ever given at length to a broadcaster who was asking tough questions.
Good evening. A few minutes ago, the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Harold Macmillan, came to Television House, and he's here now in the ITN studio. How do you feel, Prime Minister, about criticism which has been made in the last few days, in conservative newspapers particularly, of Mr. Selwyn Lloyd, the Foreign Secretary?
Well, I think Mr. Selwyn Lloyd is a very good Foreign Secretary and has done his work extremely well. If I didn't think so, I would have made a change. I do not intend to make a change simply as a result of pressure. I don't believe that that is wise, and it's not in accordance with my idea of loyalty.
The Japanese foreign minister, here in Britain a year earlier, was only one of many visitors to meet ITN's prosecuting counsel.
Could I show you these two packages? This is a British packet of ball bearings, and this is an almost identical packet of ball bearings made in Japan, a deliberate copy. What do you have to say about that?
I think this is out of order.
Well, what does the Foreign Minister have to say about it? That was my question to the Foreign Minister.
Yes, Foreign Minister will need time to answer this kind of question. If you have this in mind, you should have given him advance knowledge.
He didn't ask for advance knowledge of any questions whatever.
Of course we don't, because we didn't expect you were so treacherous.
Marilyn Monroe reduced Robin Day to silence.
My news editor instructed me to go and sit in while the ITN cameraman filmed me talking to Marilyn Monroe, but for some reason in her contract or her publicity people, with the film, it was The Prince and the Showgirl with Sir Laurence Olivier, that they wouldn't allow her to talk on camera. She was delicious, delicious.
Robin Day got more scope on a new programme.
Tell the people. Tell them on television. Questions in the public mind, answered by people in the public eye. Robin Day puts the question.
Good evening. And for Tell the People this week, I'm on Capitol Hill, home of Congress, in Washington, for an interview with the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Richard M. Nixon.
Well, I can only say this, that over a period of years, obviously, no one would be so presumptuous to say that he hadn't made mistakes.
I went to Kibi to see the paramount chief of the Akim Abu Akwa in his palace there. His name, Nana Oforiatta II.
No Robin Day interview since has had a comparable introduction or setting.
Can you tell me what it is that Dr. Nkrumah's government has against you?
Well, I really don't know.
A remarkable trip to Egypt, only months after British troops had withdrawn from Suez, gave Robin Day his first major scoop and earned him widespread professional acclaim.
In his garden, in his house in Cairo, here is President Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, who 5 years ago, as a young army officer, was prominent among those who led the revolution to remove King Farouk, and who later became president himself, and just under 1 year ago, who nationalized the Suez Canal for Egypt. And events subsequent to that will be within your recollection. Now, President Nasser, the first thing I want to ask is this. Do you want to resume normal diplomatic relations?
I think that is the duty of each country. We have to return to the normal relations.
After only 2 years on the road as a reporter with ITN, Robin Day had become a star, winning the TV Personality of the Year award in 1957.
Mr. Day, what is your secret of success?
Well, I believe these awards before have been given for individual merit, but I take this award as being a tribute to the whole staff of independent television news, without, of course, without all of whom somebody in my position couldn't do anything at all.
Thank you, sir.
In 1959, Robin Day seemed ready to exchange his flourishing television career for another. In the election of that year, he stood as the Liberal candidate for Hereford. Why did he take such a gamble?
I asked myself that question many times, and I honestly don't know the answer. I must have been mad. But I think the real answer is that I just come to the conclusion I was 36. that I thought if I don't stand now, I was unmarried and I had no responsibilities other than myself. If I don't do it now, I shall never do it at all. And I'd always been interested in politics, and I had at the back of my mind a feeling that to get up in the streets and to go around knocking on doors like a political candidate has to do is not a bad discipline for a political reporter. And I feel that that has been so. And some of my political correspondent colleagues might be better political correspondents if they have ever stood for Parliament themselves.
He really wants to be a politician himself. I don't think he's ever forgotten that. And I think that's sometimes what gives him an edge when he's interviewing other politicians, because he really wishes he was on the other side of the table.
He was a politician who never entered Parliament, but he understood how politicians worked, how they thought. He also had a certain respect for their difficulties, and because of that, he was, I think, a very penetrating interviewer.
I didn't win the election, and I had no real chance, and after I'd been defeated, I quit all connection with the Liberal Party and with party politics and concentrated on my television career. I couldn't go back to ITN after losing the election because I was still, as it were, infected with party politics. Panorama was short of a few people because Woodrow Wyatt and Chris Chataway, who had been television reporters, had got into the House of Commons, and I had not got into the House of Commons, so they were anxious to recruit a new person, so I went.
I'm now flying into the tiny town of Kanyama on the northern border of Katanga, deep in the Congo and in the wilds of Central Africa. This is the part of the world where Mr. Chombe's pathetic forces hope to repel any invasion which might be launched by the forces of Mr. Lumumba, which are about 40 or 50 miles away. Though what state they are in to launch an invasion is not clear at all. I was met by Belgian settlers wearing the armbands of their own Corps Volonté, CV, a kind of home guard to back up the Katanga army against invasion by Lumumba. They drove me into Kanyama, a one-shop, one-garage place. When I originally arrived in Elizabethville a week ago by jet plane from Brussels, almost the first thing one saw at the airport were the bright blue helmets of the UN Guard, provided by the Swedish contingent. These are the UN troops whom Mr. Chombe first refused to have at all, and now he insists must stay.
Suddenly the British people were bombarded with stories about the new names of African politicians who they've never heard of, like Lumumba and Kasabubu and Chombe, and all the television reporters went to make film of it, and the United Nations went in, and it was a big story. One can't remember what it was all about now, but it was a very big and bloody story.
In 1960, Panorama sent the young Ludovic Kennedy and Robin Day to Los Angeles.
Inside the convention hall, the proceedings are dominated by television. TV men equipped like commandos fight their way among the delegates. TV viewers know far more about what is going on from minute to minute than do the delegates on the floor. Down on the convention floor, the thousands of delegates are milling around and talking in groups while all the speeches are going on. And it's hard to say how many of them have heard many of the speeches that have been going on this afternoon. Here's a group here, Governor Minor of New Jersey, talking to some of his followers on the group. Governor, excuse me, the British Broadcasting Corporation, have you been able to hear much of what has been going on in the speeches from the platform this afternoon with all this noise here?
It's rather difficult, but I think I get the general drift of what's been going on.
Come on, sit down in front. God damn it. Get us on TV.
Can you hear any of the speeches going on?
No, you can't hear nothing here.
Senator, could you spare a moment for the BBC?
Sure.
Do you think the national televised debates between you and Mr. Nixon have made a great deal of difference to the campaign?
I think they've been important.
In what way?
Well, a good deal of the press in this country supports Mr. Nixon. This way, we're able to get and discuss these issues face-to-face with Mr. Nixon and get to the people without going through the press.
When it comes to the point on November the 8th and the privacy of the polling booth, Senator, do you fear that some people may hold your religion against you?
I suppose it's possible.
Are you confident of victory, Senator?
I'm hopeful.
Havana, citadel of Fidelismo, the revolutionary movement which has erupted violently against the old order in the American hemisphere. But even in the nationalized nightclubs, Havana is still an exciting and spectacular place. The famous Tropicana still presents a lavish extravaganza under this uniquely Cuban revolution. But the prices are much cheaper. The clientele is much less exclusive, and the dancing girls not quite so expert. Next, we move quickly on to see a new road being built through the swamps of southern Cuba. Castro's traveling press conference goes on and on in the heart of the Cuban countryside, which he plans to develop. He should not be dismissed as a crackpot or a clown. He impressed even the New York Times reporter as witty, erudite, and skillful. He's an object of fascination everywhere he goes. Some of those with him on this grueling trip soon realize why the Cuban farm workers always wear a sombrero when they go out in the midday sun. You are regarded in many quarters, Dr. Castro, as a communist. Is this true?
We have said that we are socialists.
Mr. Khrushchev says he's a socialist too.
But he says that he is going now to be communist because he is building the communist society, and we are building a socialistic society.
And Robin Day was in South Africa as Nelson Mandela was sentenced.
A remarkable demonstration by a crowd of several hundred outside the courthouse in Pretoria, the courthouse in which Mr. Justice de Vet delivered verdict and sentence in the sabotage trial, which had lasted 86 days. Nelson Mandela, whose wife you just saw, leader and founder of the sabotage movement Spirit of the Nation and a leading member of African National Congress, was accused with the others of plotting sabotage to overthrow the South African government by force and revolution. The verdict of guilty on 8 of the 9 accused was not altogether surprising because Nelson Mandela himself and others had admitted guilt on certain charges. Mandela had declared in court, "I planned sabotage because all lawful methods of opposition were closed. I have cherished the ideal of democratic society with equal opportunity for all. That is an ideal," he said, "for which I am prepared to die." Will you please get out of the way of my camera? That gentleman had earlier knocked the Panorama camera down in an attempt with other white youth to prevent our filming.
After the judge had sentenced Mandela to prison, I went to interview his wife Winnie at a secret rendezvous in Cape Town and talked to her about her reaction to the sentence. And it was a most dramatic and a newsworthy occasion which I shall never forget.
Mrs. Mandela, what are your feelings today after the life sentence passed on your husband?
Well, I am slightly relieved. It could have been far worse than this. In fact, my people and I expected death sentences for all the accused.
Could you explain to us, in your words, what it is that your husband has been aiming at and what he has been doing?
My husband has been fighting for the liberation of the African people, for the working harmoniously of all the racial groups in this country.
As a result of this life sentence on your husband and his friends, have you lost hope?
I shall never lose hope, and my people shall never lose hope. In fact, we expect that the work will go on.
After many years jetting round the world, Robin Day decided to stop reporting and concentrate on studio interviewing. He had for a long time been Panorama's chief political interviewer.
After 14 years in Panorama, I had got very tired of sometimes having to go out filming with a producer who seemed to know what he wanted to do rather than to do what I wanted to do. And the reporter must always be in charge in the field. That was how I had been brought up in television journalism. And so I just said that life is too short for this. I'm not standing for this anymore.
I think Robin chose the side of him that he did particularly well. And Robin was exceptionally persistent in his attendance in the gallery at the House of Commons, watching Parliament at work, watching politicians at work, and then moving around the political scene.
Start, if I may, on before I ask you about your Washington visit, is to ask, if it is in the national interest to get this business over quickly, are you prepared to simplify the matter by saying now, quite categorically, that you intend to remain the 14th Earl of Hume as long as you live?
Well, you see, this is the question which I told you just now that I wasn't going to answer.
Oh, I thought it was a slightly different one. I'm sorry.
No, well, it's much the same. It's the same question in a different form. And I'm not going to comment on myself or anybody else with regard to the leadership of the Conservative Party, but be quite sure we shall find the leader all right by the customary processes which the party wants.
Well, leaving aside yourself and any other specific individual, Lord Hume, is it possible in the Conservative Party, of which you have great knowledge, that given strong enough support, that a reluctant individual could be drafted to serve as leader of the party?
Well, it depends on the individual and how reluctant he was. And I don't know who you have in mind. This might be the same way as the third way of asking the first question which you asked. And again, I must say that I'm not going to be trapped or induced to, really, to answer any questions on the leadership, except to say that it will be settled by the normal, customary processes, which we've done time and again before, and which we shall complete again.
Is there not abundant evidence from the by-elections, the local elections and the opinion polls that the majority of the people of this country are fed up with both you and your government?
No. I don't think they show much enthusiasm for any alternative. If we were to lose our nerve at any moment of time because of public opinion polls or because of by-elections, then we shouldn't do that job.
But
you know,
how long do you think
can I say this, Robert?
For much of his early career, the challenging style of interviewing by Robin Cruel Glasses Day was questioned in some newspapers as unnecessarily aggressive and even plain rude.
But how low does your personal rating among your own supporters have to go before you consider yourself a liability to the party you lead?
I don't think that's rude. No, I wouldn't suggest that's rude for a moment. It's very pertinent, in fact, but he knows perfectly well it's not a question you can ever answer.
Well, popularity isn't everything. In fact, it isn't the most important thing. What matters is doing what you believe to be right. And that's what I've always tried to do, and I shall go on doing. The question doesn't arise.
I'm often told that critics said I was rude, but no one ever actually cites me from their own research a particular example of my rudeness, and I'm still waiting for it. Most of the public thought I was acting on their behalf, and they were welcomed a breath of fresh air and someone who was desperately trying to get some information on their behalf. They did not regard me as rude. A few pompous, mealy-mouthed people did, but very few people, and it was a minority opinion.
Why do you shrink from legislating about abuses in those particular spheres as opposed to a complete act? Because Mr. David Steele, who supports...
Why do you use the word shrink?
Well, because you won't do it.
No, you're using an emotive word.
Well, I use the word shrink because it occurred to me as an accurate word to describe your position.
Well, it isn't a word that I normally would accept about myself. The way that I have tried to fight the battle of inflation doesn't, with respect, give me the impression that I shrink from a fight if I believe it's right.
But may I suggest...
don't believe this one is right.
May I suggest that...
Would you mind withdrawing the word shrink?
I will withdraw the word shrink, Prime Minister, certainly, but may I tell you why I used it? And that was that because...
No, if you're going to tell me why you used it, you're not withdrawing.
No, I don't wish to think that I was being malicious or discourteous.
No.
interviewing of prime ministers over the past 30 years has changed fundamentally in my experience. The techniques of politicians, particularly prime ministers and leading politicians of all parties, has changed in the last 10 years. And they have decided not to go into a dialogue as the Macmillans, the Humes, the Wilsons, the Heath and the Callahans readily did. You are on record as saying, Mr. Kinnock, that it is inconceivable that we could transform this society without a major extension of public ownership and control.
Well, I certainly think that that's the case.
Now, there's nothing in this manifesto about a major extension of public ownership and control.
No, and I don't
Are you hiding it from the people?
Not at all. And I don't think you could describe that as a transformist manifesto. The need for our economy.
Why not?
Well, I'll come into that in a second.
That's what your left wing wants.
Yes, I know. Well, listen, you made a quotation, so we'll do without the heckling.
Well, I assume they say to themselves, or their advisors say to themselves, don't bother about what the question is, you just give your answer. And if he puts the question again, gives the same answer. And you steamroller him, and the public will be on your side, and indeed they probably are. And it's the politician's right to do that. I don't have any complaint about the politician doing it, because they are seeking votes, and they must get the votes in the way they think fit. But I mourn the departure of a helpful dialogue for the people, which television ought to be able to give the public.
I think that all of us who work in political television owe Robin Day a great debt, because he single-handedly pushed many of the boundaries forward, and all of us have studied his techniques. What I wonder is whether he himself, the style that he used that was so effective in 1958 and 59 and so on, is still as effective now in dealing with these people who spend hours being trained by media consultants to deal with Robin Day's blows.
There are many styles of interviewing, and of course Michael Cockerell or anybody else may prefer other styles of interviewing. But if leading politicians decide, as some of them appear to have decided, that they will not have a dialogue with the television interviewers, then there's nothing you can do about it.
This is BBC One.
It is 9:25 on election day. The nation has voted. The count is on.
On election night, Robin Day was in his element.
Thank you, Mr. Day. I hope when you next interview me, you don't interrupt quite so often.
Mr. Brown, it is a little difficult interviewing somebody down the line, and I hope that you don't
It's quite a little difficult being interviewed down the line.
I hope you don't take it personally.
Not a bit, Mr. Day. I like you immensely, but you must understand the rules by which we do this.
May I call you brother?
If you wish, I would be very flattered and delighted.
Goodbye, Mr. Brown.
Goodbye, Brother Day.
Well, 3 rousing good cheers and a happy Christmas to all our readers.
And what part do you intend to play in the coming Parliament? Do you want a big role in opposition, or do you want to drop out of front bench politics?
This depends on what others think, not what I think. I shall play as big a part as God allows me.
And how big a part do you think God will allow you?
You must ask him.
Well, so far as I know, he's not on our list of people to be interviewed.
No, you'd have to pay him too big a fee.
Oh, I don't know. The BBC can afford it. Thank you very much, Mr. Hogg. Put your hand on your heart again, Mr. Barber. Did you ever have any doubts?
Well, one always has a few doubts, and...
Your heart's the other side, isn't it?
Well, I've just flown down from Manchester, and I've just had a glass of champagne. Is that all right?
Well, that's more than we've had here.
Well, there you are, you see.
And what do you make of your own result in Leeds? Because you dropped your majority a great deal, didn't you, from 24,000 to about 10,000.
No, you got it entirely wrong. I think that it was my vote last year that was 24,000.
I'm so sorry, yes.
And my majority this time is 11,000 instead of 12. You got both your figures wrong, I'm afraid, but you must be very
You've
tired.
always been very good at figures, Sir Chancellor.
Yes, well, certainly better than you, Robin. It's quite clear, isn't it?
I accept that charge.
Can I explain what I think happened in Leeds?
I deal with principles rather than percentages.
Well, this is very clear.
Good morning, Shirley.
Good morning, Robin. You sound hoarser than me.
Well, you look very lovely there, if you don't mind my saying so.
We have a lovely time.
I hope you don't think that's a male chauvinist remark.
No, I don't mind a bit.
If you could just turn your face marginally to your right, and I don't mean that politically,
I think I'll find it very difficult.
we can see you in your full frontal beauty.
I see.
Just slightly to your right.
All right. Is that better?
A bit more. That's
right. You're on lip 2, are you? Yeah. Lip 1. Take lip 1 out.
Although not giving him quite such freedom as election nights, the annual party conferences have also been happy hunting grounds for Robin Day.
And then he hands back to the hall.
He's often rivaled the politicians themselves for newspaper attention.
The public on this issue, as regards the future of the Royal Navy, believe you, a transient here today and, if I may say so, gone tomorrow politician, rather than a senior officer of many years' experience.
I'm fed up with this interview, really. It's a ridiculous rolling thing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Knott.
Although he claims to have forgotten many of the names of his programmes, Robin Day can still recall some of the good and not so good moments they contained.
My interview with Jan Morris, formerly James Morris, was probably the most unnerving interview I've ever done, and probably the only interview where I've been totally lost for words for a few seconds. This is because I'd known him as a very virile undergraduate and as a journalist at Oxford, and then he later went to Casablanca and changed sex, and was a brilliant author. And he wrote this book, Conundrum, about changing sex. And this is what the interview was about.
Yet Hong Kong continues to whistle quite merrily and distinctly profitably in the dark. People reason that if the place is going to go anyway in 1998, the communists won't bother with it before then. And if there's going to be another world war, well, we'll all be in the same boat, or perhaps the same junk.
As you look at your former self, Jan, what is your reaction? Is it one of nostalgia, amusement, regret, distaste, or totally neutral?
It's a mixture of distaste and entertainment, and relief.
Why could you not, you say relief, why could you not continue as the masculine man you appeared to be, as viewers will have just seen?
I don't know why I couldn't. That is the whole subject of the book, and in a way the subject of my life. It's a mystery to me why I couldn't.
Lord Lambton was the Air Force Minister. He was the centre of a scandal. A newspaper had taken film of him showing him with prostitutes, and he resigned. And I went up to his country home to interview him about the circumstances. And he gave some very interesting answers, and that was what made it a sensational interview.
Why should a man of your social position and charm and personality have to go to halls for sex?
I think that people sometimes like variety. I think it's as simple as that, and I think this impulse is probably understood by almost everybody. Don't you?
I think a great many people may understand it, Lord Lambton. I think that is so.
He is going to have his question answered. He is going to have his question answered. He is going to have his question answered.
Perhaps the most ghastly and depressing programme I've ever done was in a brief and short-lived series called University Forum, in which the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Roy Jenkins, in the Labour government, came with me to be interviewed by undergraduates of the University of East Anglia at Norwich.
Now, time, I regret to end the
Why
programme.
you've been sitting on your backside discussing democracy!
Yes. I'd be grateful if you would not try your bullying fascist tactics on me. And I would like to thank everyone. I would like to thank this university. I would like to thank this university for inviting us here, and I would like to ask the Chancellor. I would like to ask the Chancellor whether he wishes to say a final word. No, China does not wish to say a final word. So, from the intellectual atmosphere of the University of East Anglia, which has helped us with this experimental program, we say good night from Norwich.
And I said to Roy Jenkins afterwards, were you nervous? Were you thought we were going to have violence? And he said, well, no, I wasn't. He said, I wasn't afraid. He said, I always think what every politician needs at one stage in his career is a mild flesh wound. So he was perfectly happy. But it was a dreadful program. The very depths of the university riot atmosphere.
Despite his failure to become an MP himself, the importance of parliamentary democracy has always been the focal point of Robin Day's broadcasting. And for many years he campaigned for Parliament to be televised.
I advocated televising of Parliament in the mid-50s and early 60s. I became convinced that it was necessary because it seemed to me to be obvious that the nation's prime forum of debate should not shut itself off from the nation's prime medium of mass communication. I wrote a pamphlet at my own expense and delivered it to 650 members of Parliament. Most of them took no notice. Most of them had the reaction over my dead body. The one person who really did believe in it was Aaron Bevan, who advocated it in November 1959 and shocked everybody by so doing. But now it has become the will of Parliament.
Robin Day's firm faith in Parliament is at the root of his abhorrence of the use of violence to achieve political change. In 1984, the IRA's Brighton bomb gave him and most of Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet first-hand experience of terrorism, but the show went on.
Well, I apologise for being somewhat unusually dressed and without spectacles. My normal clothes and my spectacles are still in the Grand Hotel, which I left at 3 o'clock in the morning with a lot of other people, including Mr. Tom King.
From long before the Brighton bomb, Robin Day had consistently argued against many of his colleagues on the contentious issue of television interviews with terrorist supporters.
Now, I have never been able to see any justification whatever for allowing a terrorist or a convicted terrorist or a self-proclaimed terrorist or a confessed terrorist for appearing on television to justify the crime which he has committed in this country.
Behind Robin Day's certainty on this question lies a gloomy view of the medium in which he's worked for so long.
I think we've got to presume that television is a contributing influence towards violence and disorder in society. You see, whatever television touches, it magnifies, it inflates, it projects, and it spreads. Such power should be put on the side of civilized order and civilized behavior. Television, in other words, should be biased in favor of reason.
In 1979, Robin Day's career took a different turn when a new programme proved to be the perfect platform for his love of argument and entertainment.
Hello, and here we are for the first of our weekly question times with an audience in a South London theatre which has been specially converted for television. That's to say the theatre has been specially converted, not the audience. Call Mrs. Dorothy Clark, who's got, I think, a short question for us which will reveal what our guests are really like. Mrs. Dorothy Clark, housewife. Are you there?
Yes. Well, which question?
You had a short one, I think, about what about the team and their...
About the beer?
About the what?
Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing, aren't I?
No. just ask whatever you like to ask, but not a long political question. You had one at the end, I think I remember. You had 2 or 3. Well, I thought you wanted to ask one would... How are you doing there? What have you got in that handbag? Well, while you're waiting, I'll tell you what it was. It was, what does the team like doing on a night out?
What does the team
Yes, we've got that. Steady,
Will a Tory landslide, if that should happen, would it damage the social fabric? And I want to ask it, just why do you think it'll damage the social fabric if you do?
Well, we've already seen that we have more or less the makings of a two-nation state, as in up north in Scotland we have Labour, and down south where we don't feel the unemployment issues, you know, it's more or less conservative.
Okay, what do you say to that, Francis Pym?
Well, first of all, I think a landslide is unlikely. I think landslides, on the whole, don't produce successful governments. 1945 was the obvious one, this massive landslide to Labour. I think that was extremely unfortunate, so I don't think that's likely to happen. I think that a majority between 50 and 100 would be better than one that was in 3 figures.
I have a wish to congratulate Andy Davis as an A-level student. It's the first time I've heard anyone elicit from a politician the answer that he doesn't want a landslide victory. Anyway, leave that as it may. Andy?
Instead of being an hour of topical comment and discussion, it's become an hour of belligerent knocking shop. You know, question time is becoming whinging time.
This programme, sir, is not a knocking shop. I do Good evening. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the last question time of our 10th year, which happens to be the last occasion I'll be taking the chair around this table.
Robin turned a rather boring and rather old-fashioned radio format program into a hugely entertaining and attractive and engaging and important television program. And Robin did this by himself. Now, of course, he was aided by his producer, Barbara Maxwell, who ensured that the elements of Robin that we know, the entertaining elements and also the human elements of Robin, really came through. She ensured that Robin was seen at his best.
By now, Robin Day was winning many awards as television's Grand Inquisitor.
Bow tie and the glasses, the very familiar trademarks of Robin Day.
He responds with relish.
You seem to think of Robin Day these days.
But alas, Mr. Chief Parker, I am not one of those broadcasters who bring laughter into your homes or happiness into your hearts. I am a messenger of misery. Now, it is true that I did once appear on a light entertainment program called the Morecambe and Wise Christmas Show. At the time, I had every reason to believe that they were quite respectable people. But do you know, Mr. Chief Parker, all my jokes were cut out. And their idea of humour was to beat me about the head with bottles. It has always been my secret, lifelong dream. My secret, lifelong dream to be a music hall comedian, a popular entertainer. Nothing sophisticated. BBC has never really understood me. Do you know, Mr. Chief Parker, for years I've been trying to persuade the BBC to give me an orchestra? So that I, like other people, could dance down the steps and then conduct a stirring item on the common agricultural policy. A happy Christmas to you and goodwill to all men except two.
Robin Day received official recognition too when he became Sir Robin.
Grand Inquisitor Sir Robin Day said he had promised his family a lunch out to celebrate his knighthood, providing, as he put it, his two sons hadn't been put in the Tower for misbehaving.
A punch up at the palace. Behave.
Robin's contribution to television has been tremendous, and I think has been very wholesome. It has made it possible for people in this country to understand many of our national and international events in a way which they otherwise wouldn't have done. But above all, it has enabled them to see the people he was interviewing as those people are, not as they would like to be, not the image they would like to present, not as journalists who support them describe them, but to see them as they are, good points and warts and all.
And only my natural humility prevents me. Only my natural humility prevents me from saying it. I accept this award with enormous enthusiasm. And what is more, I think it is long overdue.
Westminster is still the focus of Robin Day's life. Since leaving Question Time in 1989, he continues to broadcast, still in demand as ever at election time, still crossing swords with the political heavyweights.
Who told you that?
Paddy, I can see it with my own eyes.
Join us again here on Friday morning at 8:30. Back to Nicholas Witchell, who did us the courtesy of calling us the old contemptibles when he thought I wasn't watching earlier this morning.
Well, one of us said that, but we didn't mean it, Robin. Thank you very much indeed to you and your guests. We'll see you again on Friday.
Hello and welcome to my book talk, which this week is with the Right Honourable John Major MP. I think we won't
really to be somebody, how dismal, like a frog, to sing his name the livelong day to an admiring
We'll give you a whole programme of your own.
Even in retirement, his life is still governed by a passion for the world of politics and journalism.
I've been working on several books. I've brought out a paperback edition of my memoirs, which is still available in all good bookshops at price only $5.99. And I'm also working on a volume of speeches, collected speeches, which are coming out next year. And I'm correcting the proofs of those. And, well, I watch television a lot with extreme distaste, so much so that I go and look for some foam rubber bricks to throw at the television when I'm angry. But my proudest moment in recent years has been to achieve equality with Mr. Blair and Mr. Haig by appearing on the Des O'Connor show to sing a duet one Christmas Eve.
Could you, this is Mr. Colin Keyes, my musical director.
Oh, is he your musical director?
Yes.
I'm bad luck, oh boy.
See, you first.
The Ritz we never sighed for.
The Carlton they can keep.
There's only one place
That I know. And that is where we sleep. Underneath the arches, we dream our dreams away. Underneath the arches, on cobblestones we lay. Every night you find us tired out and more. Happy when the daylight comes creeping, heralding the dawn. Sleeping when it's raining.